we're just going to get straight into the mediumship project. Just a general feeling is that the more judgmental and everything you guys become, the more difficult it is for the spirits to stick around, if that makes sense. So the key is to not judge them. They've got decent questions, just like many of you have got decent questions, and we need to have an attitude that we want to help them with their questions. There's a number of different groups, but Mary will explain.
Yeah, here we've got. Good morning, everyone. So when I do the mediumship, I'm really doing my best to express what I feel, like let them express themselves through me. And I close my eyes just so that I can really focus on that feeling state between the two of us. And also, I guess it helps you to recognise too when it's not me and when I'm back. But I know it's a bit odd sometimes with my eyes closed. Yeah. So this morning there's all kinds of spirits who would like to come and have a chat with Jesus. The first group of spirits, well, I'll let them introduce themselves, I think. I think that's the best thing to do, rather than me introduce them. But there's 3 different groups, or 4 different groups, and then 1 individual. But we'll see, I don't think we'll have time for all of those, so Jesus and I will have to talk to some of them in our private time. We'll just see how quickly we get through the chats, won't we? Because we'll go until about 12:30, won't we? I think that's the plan.
That's obviously.
Yeah, and
refresh them.
That's right. Okay. Hello, thanks for having us.
G'day, how are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So maybe you could help us by identifying yourself and so everybody knows who you are.
Yeah. So we're a group of spirits who have kind of been following you about a bit on this trip. Well, some of us have kind of come this past few days because we're from this region. Yeah. But basically we're all spirits who've been progressing, we now understand, on the natural way. And we're quite interested in what you have to say. We are in various locations, we're drawn here together. Some of us
from various spheres.
Yes, but we have this in common, that we all are on this natural way. Well, we thought it was really the way of progression. But now we're quite drawn to the brightness that you have, and also the brightness that you bring. The brightness that you bring when you speak, and by that we mean the other beings that come when you're speaking. It's quite a lot, and we've never seen sort of beings like this before, of such brightness. We understand brightness is related to progress.
So the brighter the spirit, the more that progress.
Yes. And and so we're kind of questioning now this God concept. My name is Vanessa. I haven't introduced myself yet.
Nice.
And there's 10,000 or so of us here. I myself have just entered the 6th sphere, but a number of people are in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th spheres, but all of us have been progressing in this way, and some of us have been helping others
to progress the same way.
Yes. We've been helping members of the same group to progress in this way. So
Vanessa, how long ago were you on Earth?
Quite some time ago, in the 1800s, so the 17th century. But of course, these things are a bit hazy now. I feel that my life on Earth is quite distant from my inner world now.
Well, of course, it's 60 years far removed, plus also time, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where did you live?
In Germany, actually.
Okay.
So I've been around you since you were
Since
in
Austria
Germany.
or
in Germany.
In Germany. You picked me up at the airport there. What caused you to be on there at that time?
Well, I suppose it was more when you were in Austria, there was sort of whispers, I suppose, that there was something going on.
Yeah.
Where this brightness was conglomerating on the earth. Yeah. And I kind of took my time in getting there, and so I kind of came directly to see you.
Yeah. So oftentimes, just for the sake of our audience, sometimes people in the spirit world hear of events going on Earth, and they usually have a special significance only if the brightness seems to be brighter in that location, and then the whispers sort of pass through messages that are passed through people and so forth, to such a degree that eventually people hear about it and then they decide to investigate depending on how they feel. That's basically how it works, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I suppose, with hindsight, I suppose I'm quite an independent person, and I quite like to do my own thing. That's something that I've really developed here in the spirit life.
Yeah.
And so I suppose I just wanted to go and check you out, I suppose, on my own, not in this group setting. Yeah. Of course, since then, I've been in more of the group setting.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And is there any reason why everyone's appointed you as a spokesperson?
Well, I think that I'm quite keen and curious.
Yeah.
I've been around you the longest in this little time frame.
Yeah.
And I think they think that I'll be quite articulate on the matter, on the kind of summarising what the questions.
So they basically selected the brightest person of the group to have a chat with us. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sort of it.
I suppose that's the case.
Yeah. So how long have you been in this experience?
Myself, not very long. Yeah, not long. I guess in Earth years, maybe 20 years. Yeah. So really just in the beginnings of this experience here.
Yeah. And have you visited Earth very often since you arrived in this experience?
No, this is the first time.
Yeah. And with regard to the other people who are there, what's the general, you say they come from either from second through to this experience. Again, what's the general time period? Is it all sorts of time periods?
Yeah, it varies a lot.
Yeah. And what was your experience of God on Earth? Because you want to ask about God.
Yeah. So
what was your experience of God on Earth when you were here?
I didn't feel very... God was a part, I suppose religion was a part of society.
Yeah.
It was a part of society. I was not involved in it.
Yeah.
I didn't have a place in society really. Yeah. I was in sort of a service in a home, in a family, and as sort of a maid when I was on Earth. Yeah. So I didn't, I went to church as a matter of ritual, but I didn't have any feeling whatsoever. I didn't really develop any kind of wonderings when I was on Earth very much. Yeah. I didn't wonder about God, I didn't wonder about death.
Just eking out a life.
I didn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
It felt like a luxury too.
Yeah.
And also, I guess I didn't consider myself or the meaning of my life apart from what I was born into and what I should do on the earth.
Yeah. And for the others, is it very similar to them too, where they on Earth?
Yes, I would say as a collective, there wasn't strong religious beliefs or feeling for God. Yeah. Some people were quite atheistic, but others were just similar to myself, where it wasn't a matter of importance.
And what was the question you wanted to ask? What were the questions you wanted to ask?
Well, I suppose the biggest question that we all have is, how do we make God important? Yeah. God doesn't feel that important to us, and still in many ways alien. We understand from what you've been talking about that this that emotion is a part of
the connection with God.
Yeah,
Yes.
this, and even the idea of a connection with God seems very strange to us.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the purpose of such a connection? We've heard many words you've said about that, but it still seems like, if we're all very honest, this is not something that's really that important. And I suppose the brightness that we observe seems like, well, maybe it's relevant. But
So maybe important.
yeah,
Maybe more important than you thought.
yes.
Yeah.
But it seems very alien.
And what about those of you who've been atheists and sort of agnostic on earth? When did you discover there was a God? So that in terms of realise there must be one. Is there a time period that happened for you?
I don't think any of us have really realised that there is a singular God.
Right. So at this stage,
It's really just a non-subject.
yeah.
We've understood, some of us more than others, how the spirit life evolves, if you like, or how we change in the spirit life.
Growing.
Yes.
And have you realised that you're really growing in sort of moral development?
Yes, certainly.
So obviously there's something in the universe that established those morals.
Yes, again, it's just a very alien sort of a... We don't have a feeling of a parent, of a creator. We don't.
Yeah.
It's not in us.
Yeah.
We can all see that now. It's not a part of our logic.
Yeah.
I understand you're using logic. I love logic. It's helped me very much. But it's like there's a missing link inside where that logic would make sense.
Yeah, so if we look at some logical issues in answer to your questions, firstly, for there to be a moral law, if you like, or an establishment of moral principles that you've had to adhere to in order to grow so far, that would indicate there is some kind of intelligence behind those moral definitions of what is right and what is wrong.
Yes.
So, see, for most people, they sort of go, well, the laws of nature, which are what they call nature, they sort of feel evolved, over time through the universe evolving. But that doesn't explain if we can call it, the evolution of moral laws, which most people come in contact with only after they pass, because on earth there's a tendency to ignore moral law. So when you pass, once you realise you have to progress, you realise that by progressing I have to engage new moral states which improve my condition, and in particular improve my condition of how I love people in a principled manner. So that's how you've progressed, right? Through the spheres, you've had to engage new ideas of how, you could say what definition there is of love, and you've had to get yourself in alignment with those definitions of love in order to make progress through the spheres.
Certainly.
So that's the history of your progress. But in that progress, for many people, when they're progressing that way, they don't consider that the fact that there is a moral structure that is defining this progress tends to indicate not just natural law, but some other establishment of law, which is not just imposed by nature, but actually imposed through some kind of definition of what is right and what is wrong.
Yes, and having as much awareness of myself as I do at this point, I can see that I sort of am willing to accept that, and willing to accept, I've been willing to accept that the moral development happens.
And that there is an established process in it that everyone must go through.
Yes.
And everybody is equally has to go through the same process. If they have the same problems, they've got to solve those same problems. it's not arbitrary in its application, but rather quite structured
Yes,
and orderly in
yes,
its application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand all of that, but
Yeah.
within myself,
Yeah.
I don't feel that it's, and I think this is a collective belief that we have in the group, is that it's not ours to question where those laws originate from. It's ours to live within them.
Well, if those laws, if engaging those laws improves your condition, then it surely makes sense that whoever or whatever is the source of those laws, if we could connect to that source of those laws more directly, this would enable our condition to improve more rapidly. Because instead of having to sort of go through the process of discovery to find out what those laws are and then apply them, we could learn from that, that intelligence, obviously, that must exist, that created these laws. We could learn from that intelligence what those laws are, and therefore know, and also perhaps find out even how I am personally in disharmony with those laws, and that would help my progress far more rapidly.
It's interesting that as you speak about that, because part of my progress has been to come to recognise this worth that is equal to others.
Mm-hmm.
That was a large issue for myself when I first entered the spirit world.
Because you felt you were less than others.
Yes.
Yes.
And so coming to understand that I have equal worth, and that coming to have love for myself is something that I thought that I had really adequately dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
But as you speak about it, I can feel this remnant of that feeling in a way, because it feels as though it's not mine to approach the person who made the laws.
Exactly. So
while what you're saying makes very logical sense to all of us, actually,
yeah.
All of us have this feeling, well, it's not ours to approach the creator of the laws, it's ours to live within the laws.
It's like the creator of the law, whoever that intelligence is or whatever that intelligence is too high for me to even come to, is sort of the feeling that you have.
Yes, yes, that while we have worth with each other, we don't really have worth with
whatever that intelligence is.
Yes, whatever that authority is.
Yeah. So the issue with that, you could say, is an emotional one. Can you see that? It's an emotional feeling of unworthiness. Let's call that intelligence God, or obviously it's an intelligence far greater than our own. So let's call that intelligence God. And if God does exist, you've been feeling at this stage that to approach God would be, like almost arrogant on your part to do so. Like instead you wanted to wait for, there's sort of even this idea now of, well, we can't sort of bother that person, whoever that person is. And can you see that? That feeling is there?
Yes, it resembles fear actually.
That's right. And if you examine your life on earth with regard to the concepts of God that were presented to you on earth, because all of you had different concepts of God presented. Some of you are atheists, which means you have a concept there is no God, but then others of you had a concept of God presented to you that you felt quite repulsed by, right? As well. That if such a God does exist, like if a punishing, vindictive God does exist, then obviously it's not very pleasant to contemplate knowing that. Being.
That's right.
Yeah.
I would say that probably everyone in this group has worked through, they've sort of, while some of them did have that experience where they were sort of taught that there was a punishing God, many of them now, because even the less developed of us are in the second sphere, they've let go of that as an earth construct, if you like.
Yes.
And so there's no belief, they would say there's no belief that God is punishing because, well, they wouldn't call it God, but they would say there is no belief in a...
sort of universal punishment.
Yes, in a aggressive or angry...
or violent manner.
authority.
Yeah.
Although, now that we're speaking about it, again, there's some people are feeling, well, perhaps we haven't fully let that go.
Yeah.
Yes, so sorry, someone's just speaking and saying that the way they had let that go is by really coming to feel that that was an earth construct that was wrong, but also that God was a construct that was wrong.
Yeah, by sort of saying God doesn't exist, you can also then say a punishing God obviously then doesn't exist either. Yeah. And that's a common reason why people become atheists, actually. Yeah.
Yes, and so now the idea that you're presenting about sort of approaching this authority, if you call it God, some of those people are also feeling, maybe there is still a worry that there is aggression in that person.
Well, I can assure you there's not, because if there was aggression, you would have already experienced it.
Yeah,
obviously.
that's right. That's there's a difficulty in amongst all of us because we've felt quite at peace with the idea that the universe is very loving and the laws that govern us are very caring.
Yeah.
But now that you're introducing this idea of God as sort of a single being that we can approach and interact with, it stirs up a lot of different feelings that we had discarded by
changing your mind about things. You sort of discarded the feelings by changing your mind, and yet those feelings are still there, because obviously we wouldn't have them now if they weren't.
It's sort of like remnants or just roots of feelings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, the best thing to do with regard into the approach of God is to first look at the two ways you can approach God. So if we can focus on those two things in our discussion, and if you're willing, all of you are willing to have an experiment with all of those things, this is a faster way of dealing with it than as trying to have a logical discussion about it. We can present a little bit of logic about, and which you've already heard. I talked about conscience and the reception of love.
We wanted to say we've heard you talk about the conscience, and we really feel like we've been connected to the conscience already.
Well, you've had to be to a degree, haven't you, in order to progress?
Yes.
And to connect to the law.
But we haven't attributed that to this singular being.
Correct.
And that's where we're sort of having the...
Well, also you haven't asked questions specific to finding out about whether there is a singular being or not. If you think about it, you've just sort of accepted the law.
True.
And accepted the framework of the law and accepted the fact that you need to be within that framework in order to progress. But you haven't actually asked questions of that intelligence or whoever is the creator of that law, whether they are a singular being or not. Does that make sense?
No, that's right. And as we've heard you really name the conscience, we have understood that that's what we've been employing, and that logically, that probably, that's not out of harmony with logic, that might be a connection with a singular being.
That's right.
But it's just that direct connection that we're really balking at.
Yeah. Well, obviously, as you've learned already, the connection with the conscience is also emotional, isn't it? You've got to change your emotional condition in some way or another to accept a new law state, don't you? So you know that you've had to make changes where you've had to change your beliefs and your opinions and also your feelings about certain things in order to change. So that's common to all of you as well. All of you have made that progress, so you will experience that. So what I'd like to do is just experiment with that firstly, the whole concept of let's ask that singular being some fun. If that singular being exists, well, let's call it intelligence, just general universal intelligence at this point. And and go, well, if we ask that intelligence, which is obviously there because you've had to live by its definitions of what is right and wrong.
Yes, could we say, just to clarify, before now we haven't seen that like the conscience, if you like.
Yeah.
We've seen that as something that must have been always already within us
Correct.
that interacts
Like
with the law.
instinctually.
Yeah,
Interacting with the
instinctually.
law. Yeah.
And we could see that that's an asset, and
Yeah.
so we
So
rely on
use
it,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but we didn't see it as a connection with something outside of
Yourself.
ourselves.
As if something outside of yourself was informing you.
No.
You thought of it more as an instinctual process inbuilt in the human soul or the spirit body.
And given that we've accepted that there are external, like laws external to the human,
Yeah.
and then there's this interaction between what's inside
Yes.
us and the law, it makes perfect sense. It's a way to create harmony in the universe, is to have what we thought was something was intrinsic to
Yes.
the human
Yes.
that interacts with the law and gives guidance when you're in, it gives sensation or awareness when you're in and out of harmony with the law, so that you can correct and become more in harmony with the law. We thought this was a great design,
Of
but
course.
we never really thought that
There
never
was
really
an
thought about
intelligence
it as
behind it.
yes.
Yeah, supplying that information.
yes, or that it was designed by
And
a
intelligence.
single being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, this single being thing. Where it's
Yeah,
so
because obviously it requires intelligence to create these structures, including the design of the spirit body and the soul and all those things. Obviously intelligence is required there, but when it comes to actually it being a singular being that you can actually have a personal communication with, that's where most people in the position haven't given that much consideration, right?
No.
And then of course when a person does give that consideration, well, the question then becomes, how do they make that communication? How do they engage that communication?
Especially since there's sort of this aversion somehow that we're finding.
Yeah, these emotions within going, oh, the whole concept of God is not really a concept I'm really comfortable with. It's probably the best way.
Yeah, can we refine it further
Yeah.
and say it's not the concept of God,
No.
it's the connection to
Correct,
God that
correct.
there's an aversion to.
Yeah. But therefore the concept of the person of God, you're averse, there's an aversion to as well. A God that can interact with you personally. Yeah. So for most people who have progressed the way you have, there's this sort of general feeling amongst everybody, isn't there, that there is this intelligence imposing law, and in terms of there is a law that governs the universe, and it's very loving and caring, and it requires change in order to get into higher conditions of love and therefore happier places. And each of you have experienced that. But most of the time there's not a lot of thought given to what if that intelligence is a singular being, and also if it is a singular being, what's the possibility of me, even if there is a singular being, what's the possibility of that singular being actually wanting to listen to me, or me being able to listen to that singular being? Yeah, and that's something.
And being worthy.
And being worthy of her hearing. But also sometimes there's also the opposite emotion. Like if I hear the singular being, he wants me, and he tells me things that I don't really want to hear, then there's also that kind of aversion, isn't there, at times?
Yeah, I don't think that's common to this group.
No,
I think
no.
this group is, we have many brothers and sisters who perhaps have that issue, particularly perhaps where I am now.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is why I haven't progressed very far where I am now, but I feel for myself it's just quite a feeling that, God should be distant from me in some way. That feels righteous to me.
Yeah. And could you also see that your life in particular, where serenity is 60, you haven't felt as strongly connected to it in the way that many others around you have felt connected to it. And there feels to be some kind of almost dissatisfaction or misgiving within you about it as well, that's caused you to seek back on earth and to look around you more than the average person may do.
Yes, I hadn't really thought of that, but that's true. Yeah. And I quite liked the brighter beings that came.
Of course, they're lovely and kind, aren't they?
Yeah, I didn't interact with them. No.
Why is that?
Well, I didn't think to.
Yeah, for the same reason, do you think? Probably. Yeah, well, I'm going to bring them to you again, so they'll be around now from now on. Yeah. And they'll be able to help explain some things to you when we finish our conversation. So you can see them now, right? And, and they have an interest in you. Can you feel that?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they have interest in you, so that's lovely in a way, isn't it, too, that people who have never met you before have an interest in you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's firstly experiment a little bit with conscience. Can we do that? And as a group, you can do that in any sphere. So this is applicable whether in the second sphere or the sixth. You can basically experiment with the conscience. And the very first part I would like to experiment with conscience is let's focus firstly on whether that intelligence is a singular being. So the way to do this is to ask that question of that intelligence and to let yourself feel what the answer is. And for those of you in higher spheres, you'll feel that answer more strongly than those of you in lower spheres for different reasons, which we can explain later. Does that make sense? So if you have that feeling, I want to know whether this intelligence, that governs the universe and governs all its laws, whether that intelligence is a singular being or is some kind of general energy source or something else. Is it a singular being? And what response do you get?
Yeah. Some people haven't got a response yet. They're still asking.
Yeah.
Some in the third and fourth spheres, actually, those ones in the second, but I've been helping those ones.
Yeah.
They're quite sure. For myself, I find it a little confronting. Yeah. The answer is yes. But it's definitely stirring things in me. This must be why I was feeling.
Sort of why you don't want to know almost.
Yes, why I hadn't really asked that question. I've conceded the point really when you talked about it. But it's very strange for me at this point in my progress to realise that there's difficulties personalising something.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So therefore, emotion, that's obviously there. Remnants, as you call it, from probably, again, your earth life, right? That are still being there, that are being sort of covered over by some intellectual reasoning about whether there's a God or not, things like that. So that singular being, now for those of you who haven't received a response, how are you going with that? Because we want to help you receive at least one response, one way or the other from that intelligence, right?
Yeah, there's just a bit of discussion going on about,
how to do it,
and why the answers, why there's a resistance to asking the question, and
so can you see the dynamics are you've got to want to know the answer to the question as a part of whether you're going to get a response or not. So those of you who wanted to know the answer to the question got a response. Those of you who weren't really sure you wanted to know the answer to the question for various reasons haven't really received a response.
Yeah,
Now, if you look
there's a bit of sort of anger happening, but it's all good. Everyone's sort of getting there.
So can you see the desire to know the truth is also part of the mechanism of how this works? You've got to have a sincere desire to know the truth in order for there to be a response. It doesn't mean that you predict what the truth is. It just means you have to have a sincere desire to know. I want to know. And you can see, can't you, that there's certain emotions within the person that may cause them to not want to know.
Yes, certainly.
And so what I would recommend for those of you who are yet to receive a response is to feel about why you don't want to know. Right?
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Some of them are helping that. So pretty much everyone's got a yes answer. There's just a bit of
lack of desire to know.
And some of the others coach them in terms of
how to do it.
and also just that they didn't want to know, and they had some. It's a particular. Some people had like a bit of a anger moment about it, and then got on with asking.
And sometimes some of this anger times and everything will feel a bit foreign to many of you, right? Because you haven't had that for very, very often, right? Yeah, in the past, particularly recent past. Obviously, many of you when you passed in the first year, and then you did have some anger then, but it's pretty foreign emotion as you progress, isn't it? So I can understand you feeling a bit stressed about the anger as well. So the key is to be a bit relaxed about those things.
That was mainly just a smaller part of the group from the third year. But they're telling me to say that they're on
board. Good. Okay. So we can, if we've established that being is a singular God, which is very interesting in itself, isn't it? Because how huge must that God be? So we need to probably ask how big God is, and is God limited? So the next question would be to ask: is there? Do you as a God have limits?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That one's quite easy for most of us because I would say there's a common belief amongst us that that the universe is somehow vast and limitless in a way. And it's really understanding that is God. Yeah.
So you can see that God's own definition of himself or herself, if you want to more personalise it, is obviously that God is infinite and that God is singular in the sense that there is a personality, if you could call it that. It's what I call it, it's a great soul of the universe. Yeah.
It's quite incredible, isn't it, that something so vast can have a personality.
Yeah, it is quite
and sort of, I'm still finding it confronting to think that something so vast and wise and powerful that I could personally connect. I understand, I'm going to have to go there.
Yeah, but it does make logical sense if you think if God is infinite, even if he's got like billions and billions of children. If God's infinite and he's not bound by time or space or any of those physical constraints of being inside the universe, then it would also make sense that he can connect to all of his creation one way or the other. So that does make logical sense if you think about it. So if we then ask a few more questions of God, like, are the laws that I've been living by established by you?
Yes.
Yes. So that straight away tells us that the laws are not just created in the universe arbitrarily by that and then come together. They've been created for a purpose by that intelligence, by God.
Yeah.
Okay, so are there laws that allow each human to connect to God personally?
Yes.
Yes, so that's yes too. So these are questions that I asked years and years ago in my own life, and I got the same responses as you. So I then thought, well, let's experiment with this more, right? So can I ask God any question and receive an answer?
Yes.
Will I understand the answer?
Yes, as long as I'm open.
Yeah. There's also more to that answer, isn't there?
Well, I suppose we sort of understand this already. It depends on the level of development of the spirit at the time.
Correct.
How well they understand it.
Correct.
So it's a sort of knowledge we already feel that we have.
Yeah. So that intelligence has already shared that knowledge with you in the past, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Already shared that knowledge even though you didn't realise it was God at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. So if we work on it from that perspective, then we can see now that we are able to ask any question about anything. So let's ask some fundamental questions about where we live. Like, so is the sixth sphere the limit of human progress?
No.
Okay, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because many people in the sixth sphere do believe it's the limit of human progress.
Yeah, I was told when I came here that it was.
Yeah, that's right. So So obviously, that is interesting in itself, that even the people who live in the sixth sphere are telling other people that it is the limit, and yet this intelligence is saying it's not the limit. Now, I suppose it's good to ask those people why they thought it was the limit as well, isn't it? Because you can see they must have thought it was the limit because it was the limit that they had.
And they've been here such a long time.
Correct. Tens of thousands of years, many, some hundreds of thousands of years, obviously. So is that limit? So there is no limit according to God. There isn't a limit. But is the next period of progress? Does that require something from God to progress, or can humans just progress without this thing from God? So does future progress from the sixth sphere require something from God?
Yeah, it feels like yes, but it's very it's testing the limits of my openness.
Yeah. What do you think that is? What, in terms of emotions that you feel about?
I think it's this thing that and perhaps I need to just go and work on this feeling that I've been saying, this remnant of a sort of a belief that I had about that I shouldn't have any kind of special or preferential or personal interaction with someone who's quite.
Yeah, but let's separate preferential from personal for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
Because if we ask God, does God give preferential treatment?
No, that was quite easy.
Okay, so it's not preferential. So it's not because you're more preferred than somebody else. So on what basis does God offer more gifts? These things that we need to receive from God in order to progress. Is it the question can be, is it based on desire?
Yes, yeah.
Of the individual, not as a collective, but of the individual.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's based on individual desire as to whether a person is able to receive these things. And have these things been on offer the entire time humans have existed? So has whatever it is God is offering to grow beyond the sixth sphere been on offer the entire period of human existence?
Yes, but not given.
So why wasn't it given? This is a more complex answer now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hard to. You see, up until now, what I've been doing is getting you to ask yes or no questions. Because yes or no questions, you can get either a confirmation quite rapidly or no. And so it's easy to tell. But a more complicated question, such as how does it work, is a lot harder to receive. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So it's good when we begin with this connection with God and using the conscience that we use yes or no questions for our own sake, because it's a lot easier to receive them. And as we progress, what you'll find is more and more you'll be able to not only hear the yes or no question, but the explanation as to why.
Yes, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but we do know that, but we just didn't know that was with God.
Yeah.
It's just that I'm having a personal problem.
That's all right. And if we can just delay your personal problems for a little while, can you do that? Because I'd like to experiment with what it is, what substance is it that we need to receive from God in order to progress. That's it.
Yes.
You need to ask God that question.
Yeah, it's about love.
Yeah. So, and is it more human love we've got to receive, or is it God's love we have to receive? So is it God's love?
Yeah.
Yeah, not human love. Okay, so the question then becomes, how do I receive that love? And you've heard me speak of that, right, with some groups. And the main thing is to stay emotionally open and be prepared to feel such emotion, obviously, right? And then to ask for God, for you to be able to feel what God feels about you. What are God's feelings for you? And to be open enough to receive those feelings.
Some people are able to do that.
Yeah. Now you're right in saying for yourself that you're going to need to feel about some things here, right? Yeah. And can you feel it in yourself? There's this feeling of like, I would like to stay in control of everything here. Stay in control of how I feel. Can you see that you sort of have that underlying feeling that you'd like to stay in control of your feelings? And that is what's preventing you from being able to feel what God feels about you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said it was that. It feels such a strange thing at this point to feel like there's somewhere that I don't want to explore.
Inside self.
And outside myself, in that connection.
Yes. Yeah.
It's something that I sort of feel drawn to.
Yep.
And inquisitive about.
Yeah. But almost in an intellectual way, you've been inquisitive, haven't you? Like, I want to know. But can you see on the emotional side, once we're starting to confront some emotional feelings, now it's sort of like, oh, do I want to know? You know?
Well, I suppose you're right. I want to know without confronting this feeling inside of myself.
Correct. Yeah. So what I would suggest that you will need to do is to confront those feelings inside yourself.
I suppose I'm asking what are those feelings? Why does it feel morally wrong for me to ask for God's connection to me? I can sort of logically. It's quite tricky.
So what's your logical conclusion?
Well, that obviously on earth I had a lot of feelings that I shouldn't think of myself.
Yeah, you were taught to not think of yourself if you think about your life.
Yes.
You were always thinking about who you were caring for, who you were serving.
And what I must do.
And what you must do, yeah.
And I can see that that's been an issue that I had to correct in harmony with the Lord in order to develop. But somehow being equal with humans, that's okay with me now.
Yeah. But
to have a connection with a loving authority now feels like suddenly I'm back in that earth emotion.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, the earth emotion was never really discarded. It was just suppressed through imbibing some beliefs that helped you suppress that emotion.
But I feel I never act in that feeling here, and I feel love for everybody here, and I think that I have regard for myself also. Yeah,
but not in the sense that, not the regard God has for you.
Oh, you're saying my level of regard for myself is not the same as God's regard
for you.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Because at this stage you can say you're not.
You're saying it's a greater level of love.
Yes, far greater actually. It's going to be infinite in nature. So it's going to be interesting. And this is the confrontational thing emotionally. We're used to experiencing our normal group of emotions, but we're not used to getting stretched emotionally beyond our normal experience.
Yeah, I feel I've stretched a lot in order to get to this point, but it's just more now, isn't it?
That's right. So to receive some of God's emotions, it's going to stretch you beyond your experience. Does that make sense? And most people who don't want a connection with God don't want that to be stretched. They don't want that level of feeling like, I'm happy to handle my own feelings and my own emotions, and I'm happy to keep them in control. But I don't want to be stretched beyond my capacity to do what I currently do.
Yeah.
And so because it gives you a feeling almost like, am I now going to go out of control? Like what's going to happen to me?
And I feel when you're talking about it, really, there's sadness in me. There's sort of a sadness to believe that I could be regarded more than I regard myself.
Yeah, and in fact, God regards humans far more than any six-gear spirit regards a human, which is an interesting thought when you think about it. God sees humans as the pinnacle of his creation. Whereas six-gear spirits really treat all themselves as equal and can see intellectually, they can see that they are the best of all creations in the sense they're self-aware and other things like that. But they don't examine and go, but that actually means that for some reason we are the pinnacle of God's creation. Yeah.
Thank you. This is really helpful.
Yeah.
I haven't had the feeling. I believe strongly that I have real love. It's not just insulated for myself and for others.
Yeah.
But I understand now it's about being open to there being more love for me.
That's beyond your
I have already for
ability
myself.
to accept, shall we say. Yeah.
Beyond what I have for myself.
Correct. Yeah.
Or what others have for me.
Or what others have for you, yes. And that would make logical sense given if God's infinite, that any feeling God has would be greater than any human's feeling.
Yes, I suppose I've felt that the law is such a abundantly loving construct that there's already so much love in the way that our universe is constructed and the way it operates.
Yeah.
I feel so cared for, I feel so safe in and able in this system. I feel more able than I ever felt on earth, that as long as I live in harmony with this law and this sense that I was calling, that was internal, that, expansion and ability was always growing, and I was feeling that my love was purifying. But I can sense now that it's about expanding beyond that love, is internally and receiving it. So,
and allowing it to come to you.
Yeah, I think even in this discussion, maybe
you're already starting to do it, just by having the discussion of what is happening.
Yeah,
you're already starting to do it. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you're saying in the discussion we've learned, yes, we can find truth from God, but more powerfully, obviously, as you can see, the truth, it was interesting, wasn't it? Because you found truth and it did confront some things internally and so forth, but more powerfully when you start to see love, that has other levels of confrontation that are sort of more emotional than intellectual. And so it's a very different experience in that regard.
It's been very helpful for the others in the group, all of that you just mentioned, but for myself in particular, is why don't I want to do this asking? And that's helped me very much.
Yeah, so what I'd recommend for you as a group now is to, let yourself ask more. Not only ask for information, because that's important to discover truth, but also to ask for God's feelings for you. And also, God's feelings for you are going to be limited only by your capacity to receive them. So this is the fundamental truth that we need to understand, that this universal being's feelings for you are only limited by your own capacity to receive them, not by the universal being, God's capacity to give them.
That's the thank you. That's very clear, and it's just being open to the reception of more love.
Now,
obviously
Yeah, just to help a little bit too, if you look in your environments now, each of you, if you go back and look at your environments, you can see you've got each being able to progress to a higher condition, even though sometimes in the same sphere. You can see you can now move more freely in that location.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of you have actually changed locations completely, right?
Yeah.
So that's an indication of the benefits of doing what we've just done. And,
I don't think there's any.
Critical about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, thank you for having the talk with us.
Yeah.
I also feel more willing now to speak to this.
Correct. Because what was preventing you before was this feeling that you're sort of not worthy to speak to them. And so now you've sort of fueled some of God's feelings for you. You can go, oh, from God's perspective, I am worthy to speak to them, even though they're in a better condition than I am.
Yes, and I think it's in particular with them because once that I learned about this worth matter that was in me from the earth and that I had worked on, I didn't ever have a problem speaking with spirits who were in a higher condition than myself. I felt I could do that, but I think it's because they have God's love in them.
Correct.
That was the challenge.
It's a different experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Than speaking to a normal person.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very, very much.
That's my pleasure.
Yeah, and of course, from all of the group.
Yeah.
Very happy, and everyone, each in their own different processes now, but a lot of us have had this question of what are the emotions? Why we understand conceptually, but why is it tricky doing it? And that's helped a lot of us actually. Yeah,
so the key from now on is to be prepared for emotional expansion, not just intellectual expansion.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets a bit tricky because the emotional expansion means that you're going to be receiving emotions that are beyond your capacity to currently understand or control.
Yeah.
And this, of course, means that you'll be overwhelmed a bit. And most spirits, by the time they get to 60, don't like the feeling of being overwhelmed too much.
Yeah, and I think you're right that a few things from what you said. I mean, really, there's not many in this group in the sixth sphere. It's mainly myself who's sort of in the. But it's this idea of being. I'll speak for myself. I think many of the others share this feeling, but I feel like in my past I've allowed myself to be overwhelmed by my emotion, but the thought of it's almost like allowing another being's loving emotion to overwhelm me and then have my emotions about that. Correct. I understand now what you meant about the control. I didn't understand, but now I think I understand that.
That's right.
It's defined by the emotional experience, it seems like, is defined by the strength of love that I receive, not by what's already inside. I understand. I need to figure some things out.
And that's normal, right? Every time we receive more love, there's more things to figure out. And also more questions to ask God about, with truthful things to ask God. And also what you'll find is that there'll be more nuance in the answers as well. You'll get more clarity with the answers. So that's a normal process. But what I encourage all of you to do too, with the bright spirits who are now here, they can help you through that process, obviously. Because they themselves have actually gone through the experience of receiving that love. And so they know what opposition there might be within the person emotionally as to why they can't receive more. And there'll be times, for those of you in the lower spheres, there'll be times when you think you're trying to receive more, but you can't. And you know, they'll be able to help you to examine the reasons, the emotional reasons that will be inside of yourself as to why you can't receive more. And so, you know, they'll be able to have you in good care until such a time as you don't need their care, right? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lovely to meet you though, Vanessa, and the entire group too.
Yeah, a lot of thanks from everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just thinking for you guys, is there any questions you'd like to ask about that? And maybe I'll just get some highlights and do that to us. Who'd like to cross and on the side, jump, and sort of up back. Now, you're asking Mary and I these questions, not the spirits in this case. So, and then over to you,
I want to thank you, Vanessa. The spirit from the eighth sphere was visiting me.
Yeah, I don't want to do any personal experiences.
Okay, during this.
No. Very thank you.
Okay.
I have a question about when it was here on Earth, a feeling motion.
Yeah.
That also changing our location in the spirit world.
Yes, it does.
Change the environment.
Well, it's how much love you receive that changes your location, or what condition of love you are in that causes a change in your location. And obviously, for all of the spirits involved in that experience that we just had, they were receiving God's love, so of course their location changed as a direct result of receiving God's love. And they didn't have, but for many of them, they didn't have a lot of opposition to receiving that love that many people on earth have. So one of the big problems most people on earth face is that most people on earth don't even really have a concept of God or have any real connection with God. Even people who are, believers who say they believe God for most of their life don't really have a very good concept of God or an accurate concept of God. And so on earth, it's a little bit different because you've got to work your way through those concepts. These people have already had a life where they have come to see there is an intelligence and have come to see that there are moral laws they've got to abide by. They've also, all of them, none of them are in the first sphere of the spirit world. So in other words, they had released a lot of their addictions already that would prevent them from receiving love. And so that's why they could receive it and also then change in their condition. Whereas pretty much everyone on earth has a lot of addictions they're going to have to work through. And therefore a lot of unloving are in the first sphere, and therefore have a lot of unloving things they need to work through. It's not impossible to receive love while you're in the first sphere, but there's a definite lack of awareness of the sin and a lack of awakening to your sin that prevents you from having a very strong desire to receive anything other than your addictions. So if you think of most people's experience on earth, your addictions are like the dominating thing that you want. And so they are the things you want to receive. So to actually create within yourself a sincere and pure desire to receive something that's not based on an addiction is like a very foreign thing for most people on earth. And you need to work through a number of your addictions in order to go through that experience.
So, to be very clear, it's not feeling emotion that changes your environment in the spirit world. It's your development in love. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's the direct answer, and the reason why emotion is tied into love is because often your unhealed emotions, the ones which are your addictions, are all emotional as well. So obviously, to have an awakening to love, to allow yourself to receive love, particularly from an outside source, you're going to have to work through some emotion. So there is a linkage between emotion and love. But it's not by feeling the emotion that you improve your condition. It's by feeling the love and growing in love that you improve your condition. Does that make sense, Barry?
I'm just thinking, is it not an automatic given then that
No.
release some of those heavy emotions you then?
Yeah, no, it's not an automatic.
That's a very important
good question.
distinction to make.
Yeah. A lot of people assume that from what we're teaching, but that's not what we're teaching. It's not an automatically given that if you release an unloving emotion, that you will be in a more loving condition. You think about love, there is all of your opposition to it, which could be called the unloving emotions, and then there's all of the things you've got to know in agreement with it in order to receive, to be in a new condition. So there's two things that have got to have to happen, and I've mentioned this many times. And one is the release of the unloving emotion needs to occur, but that doesn't automatically guarantee you are now in a better condition of love in the sense that all it does is release the unloving, which is obviously better than not releasing it, but it doesn't mean you'll accept a new loving condition.
Like you could release one addiction emotionally, but if you don't desire more love, all the spiritual principles that we've been talking about the last couple of days, and seek them and want them in your heart, then you just engage in another addiction.
And another one and another one, probably.
You can let go of a past pain, but if you hold on to a belief that is unloving, you don't automatically release the belief unless you are desiring or aspiring or seeking the loving truth, if you like.
Yeah. So the average person on earth, when they release an addiction, if you look at, say, a physical addiction, let's say you stop smoking. The average person on earth who stops smoking, instead of smoking, they do what? They eat a bit more, or they, get lollies or candy, or, they drink a bit more, or they they usually substitute it for a more healthy addiction. Is the way it sort of works. And so the problem with that is that you can stop the addiction, but if you don't receive the more loving state, then of course you'll be very, very prone to just staying not much more advanced to where you were. So obviously if a person's smoking and they stop smoking, they're in a better place because they're just demonstrating more love to themselves, that they're not taking a substance that actually is toxic and poisonous into their lungs. The lungs are the most sensitive part of your body, and so, in terms of absorbing things from the external. And so, obviously stopping a toxic substance from entering your lungs is going to be very helpful. And therefore there will be an improvement also in the person's love of self by them stopping that particular thing. But it doesn't mean they're automatically more loving to everybody else. And it doesn't mean their own condition of love, which is a gift they give to others, is going to improve. Do you follow? Yeah. So do not assume that by releasing emotion relating to your addictions that you will automatically be in a new loving condition, because that new loving condition has to be desired.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the example Laura gave with her question yesterday.
Yeah.
When she just had a feeling of not caring for others, and it seemed like there was a lot of grief for her to feel.
Yeah.
And maybe I misunderstood, but it felt like if she feels that grief, then she's going to have a propensity to then want to know others and care for others. Does that mean
But if you think about Laura's question,
Yeah.
what had happened for her to ask the question?
There was a number of things that had already happened for Laura to even ask the question.
There's a feeling like, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I want to be a more loving person.
She became conscious through the conscience. So she became aware through the conscience that there was a problem with the way she's living her life.
And that was the development of love.
And that's already a development of love, if you think about it, isn't it? And that awareness caused her to even ask a question. And in the process of asking the question, she realised there was emotions involved in it through the answer. And then if she engages those emotions, then she'll be released from the reason why she doesn't want people in her life. But that doesn't guarantee she's going to want people in her life. That's going to have to be a conscious, loving decision she makes to become more loving. You understand?
Yeah, sometimes she's just a little bit more freed up.
She's more freed up in the sense that the unloving thing isn't driving her actions anymore. But she still needs to decide whether she wants to be more loving to others or not, and how she's going to do that.
I guess is that the same also receiving divine love? If you receive divine love, you still have to act in harmony with it.
Of course. Yeah, so you receive some of that love, you then now have a choice or decision to make about whether you're going to live in harmony with the love you've received, or are you going to still try to live the same life. Of course, if you still try to live the same life, if you've received some love from God, it's going to be harder, and you're going to have to try harder with your addictions to maintain the same life. Right? So that's good that it's like that. And so you can receive some of God's love, and then it's more painful to stay in your current life, which is the purpose, if you like, because God doesn't want you to stay in your current life. He wants you to live the happier one, right? So that would mean changes to your current life. But see, a lot of people on earth go, I don't really want to change my current life. And so they don't, right? So they're not going to live in harmony with the love they receive back.
Yeah. I think it's a good question because it really hits on a bit of a theme that we were talking about with the guys yesterday. It's of wanting the spirit interaction that makes them feel powerful and accomplished, because there's a real need to develop aspirations. That's a very big part of growing God's way, is developing loving aspirations.
And sincere aspiration.
Yeah, well...
Not based on corruption such as I want to be powerful, I want to be special, I want to be any of those things. You know?
Yeah. But when you feel like the development of aspiration is something that's unloving, if you like, you have a tendency to want kind of quick fixes and want you to attract these spirits who promise those things. But in my experience, unless you're concurrently developing loving aspiration, it's very difficult to actually get to the causal level of your feelings, because the aspiration is the impetus to actually deal with terror, or deal with really difficult things. And it's obviously having, say, in Laura's case, we're talking about how her heart is quite closed at the moment because there's all this grief she's trying to keep under control. Obviously that grief really precludes her from having an open-hearted relationship now. But just her releasing the grief is not the same as her developing the desire to have an open-hearted relationship. So it's both things if she wants to have connected, loving relationships to do. Develop the aspiration to love, release the grief, and if you develop the loving aspiration, as you're starting to release the grief, the two support each other.
Obviously, if you do release the grief, you are more open to developing the loving aspiration.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is an improvement, but it's not a guarantee that you will, which is something that you've been thinking it is, but it's not. Yeah. And one or two more questions, because we really want to get on with another group. So if you go up to there, on this side, and Rebecca on this side.
Yeah, so my question's about the conscience, and if the spirits were able to connect to their moral conscience, because they've reached a higher sphere, so they've connected to their moral conscience.
Can I just clarify, for any person on the natural love path to progress through any sphere, they are going to have to connect to their conscience in order to grow. Yep.
Okay, yeah, because that's the question, like, they didn't have faith in God.
Correct.
But they were able to connect to their conscience.
Well, they had faith that there was an intelligence defining their moral condition.
Right, so they were able.
But they viewed it as instinctual.
And they knew from that it was themselves, it wasn't
well,
their connection to God.
They knew it wasn't themselves, because it wasn't within themselves in the sense that they already were in the new moral condition. They knew that they thought that there was some kind of instinct inbuilt in every human that tells them all the things that are right and all the things that are wrong. Not realising actually that is coming from God or from the external intelligence. So the way a lot of spirits on the natural love path progress is they come to recognise there is a moral law that they must adhere to if they wish to progress. But most of them believe that that moral law is some kind of instinctual thing that they've got to connect to within inside themselves, and they don't give a lot of thought to why they can't connect to the whole lot of it, and why they can't receive all the information, and so what they do is they just receive a little bit of information, the next truth they need to face, and then they bring themselves into harmony with that truth by working through their emotion. And that's how they progress. But they don't understand that next truth that they needed to face came from God. They sort of think it came from some internal mechanism that exists inside of themselves.
Okay, so it wasn't bringing them closer to God, but it was improving their condition.
It was bringing them closer to God in the sense that it was bringing them closer to living in harmony with God's higher laws.
Yeah.
So it was bringing them more in harmony, and this is why God does it, is because he knows that no matter whether you believe in God or not, he knows that if you can start connecting to the conscience, you really are connecting to him. And he knows that sooner or later you're going to start asking questions about where this intelligence comes from and how intelligent this intelligence actually is. Right? And whether it's internal or external. Sooner or later that will come about through that experience. But it's not a guarantee it will, but usually sooner or later it will.
And you know the diagram that Jesus has been drawing on the board with the immovable line down the middle, and when you're in harmony with the law or out of harmony with the law. Like Vanessa herself was very in harmony with the law, so she was really quite a happy person. That's why it was so weird for her that she suddenly started to feel
something out
frightened. Yeah. But Jesus has been saying all weekend, you can live on the harmony side of the law without even involving God, but it's much easier if you do.
And of course, beyond the sixth sphere, you can't live in harmony with law in the seventh sphere without involving God. But in the sixth sphere and below, the sixth sphere, I should say, itself, you can live in harmony with the laws that govern everything to that sphere without involving God. Yeah. Okay.
You talked to Vanessa about a sense of some sort of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Despite, I imagine, they're all in a beautiful place and nice people.
Yeah.
Is that the inbuilt function we all have of like a God-shaped hole giving a sense of emptiness? And
There is no God-shaped hole giving yourself a sense of emptiness. God doesn't create your human soul with a hole. He created it perfect. It's a perfect human only. But what happens over time is you start wondering whether there's just more than that. And then in the process of wondering whether there's more than that, you start wondering, well, if there is more than that, how do I find out more than that? So the questions of truth that you don't understand yet start bothering you, and that creates a sense of dissatisfaction. Does that make sense? Not a hole, but a sense of dissatisfaction. There's things I want to know, but I don't know them. And imagine after living like 10,000 years or so, which many of these people do in the sixth sphere, they have lived much longer than that. There's something missing, and what often happens to many of them is they go, okay, I'm going from one thing to another thing to another thing and doing all these interesting things, and it's all very fun and enjoyable, and I have good mates and good friends, and it's all very enjoyable. We all have fun together, and it's all very loving as well. It's all great. But all I keep doing is going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And in the past, when I progressed from sphere to sphere, I was going to much grander things. But these are all much the same things, but they're just different same things. Like, 1 week, you could say one period without 1,000 years, I'm interested in biology. Then I feel like I've studied that to its limit, but there's a whole heap of things I don't understand with it still, but I feel like I'm now at my limit about understanding that. And then I go, okay, I'm limited there to understand more. So what I'll do is I'll go and start study, the human spirit body. I'll study that. And I study that for 1,000 years or two. And then I get to my limits of understanding that, and I'll go, well, it's weird because I think I understand it all, but there's something else going on. I don't understand that. It's like what happens over time is there's a whole heap of information that's not available to me. And you start worrying about that. Like, in the sense that you start, not worrying like you guys worry, about your life or anything, but you start sort of thinking, what's going on? There's all these things I don't know. And it's like everything I try to investigate, I get to know a lot about it, a lot more than what is known on earth about it, of course. But I always feel like there's a lot more to know, but I don't know it, and I can't find out how to know it. And then after a while, you get a bit sort of like, okay, I have to give up now on knowing more about that. And then I go and find another thing, investigate that. And after you've done this 10 to 15 times or 20 times, you start realising every time I study a new thing, I get to a limit, like of my understanding, that I can't go beyond. And then not only that, I think I'm in the sixth sphere and there's nothing beyond that either. And then I'm going, but all up until now I have had to change and progress, but now all of a sudden I'm not really changing and I'm not really progressing because there's a whole heap of things that before, when I didn't understand them, I investigated them, I always got to understand them. And now, when I investigate it more and more and more, and in the end, I still can't understand it properly. And then you start, that causes within you this sort of feeling of, no, perhaps there's something that I'm not getting at all. And then that causes you to start asking more stronger questions to the universe, which at this stage, usually a person doesn't believe in God, it's just to the universe. And depending on how direct you ask those questions, you'll get direct responses. And eventually, that's how most people learn to, if it's not from spirits who are higher and higher condition, this is how the other way they live. By realising there's a limit to their progress, and unless they discover what that limit is, they'll always be limited. The limit is the perfect natural man. That's the limit. God designed you to be the perfect natural man, and without God, that's all you will ever be. The perfect natural man. Now, of course, life on earth is far removed from the perfect natural man, and that's why it's so unhappy. But life in the sixth sphere is perfectly aligned with the perfect natural man. And so, therefore, after living there, first few thousand years of living there, most people are pretty happy because it's a happy life and you enjoy it, and you finish up, usually in the sixth sphere after that period of time, you finish up meeting what you can feel is your soulmate, like in terms of you feel the other half of yourself, and you start realising you've met her or him, and then of course you live your life together, and it's really enjoyable in that regard. And you're doing all these different things, and all those things are fantastically enjoyable as well. But there's always these limits that you don't seem to be able to go beyond, and that's the limit of the perfect natural man. And eventually, you, given enough time, you start going, well, what's going on?
So why do you think people seek God before that point? What do you think are the factors that cause people to seek God?
Well, I think there's a number of factors that cause that, I think. Firstly, a lot of people have imbibed from earth beliefs that tell them that there's something beyond themselves, like an intelligence does now.
So that kind of opens.
So that kind of opens up. So a lot of times these people are from religious faiths like the Muslim faith or the Christian faith, which is talking about a personal God, and they feel there's more to investigate along those lines. So that's a good solid half of the population there. And then with the other ones, a lot of times it's just circumstances, like a bright spirit comes to them and he's really, really happy. And they go, why are you so happy? Like, I've never met anybody so happy as you. But why cause you to be so happy? And then the bright spirit said, well, it's because I've received God's Son. What? There's a God? Like, I don't agree with that, and then you have a discussion, and quite often that's how it happens as well.
What about on earth though?
On earth it's very similar, isn't it, though? I think. Yeah. Experiences, people you meet, people who you see have faith often feel happier than yourself, things like that. And you start wondering why. And so start questioning yourself and questioning. And then, of course, there's the law of attraction, the law of cause and effect as well, that cause these attractions to occur. And so naturally, you know, God's always trying to lead you to God. Like, he's always, you know, he's designed the universe to lead you to him eventually.
I always find it funny, you know, we often have people say, oh, listen to what you say, yeah, that's all very logical. You know, some of that already knew. So it's not that amazing. And I always think, well, God would want it to be pretty logical. God would want you to be able to figure a lot of this stuff out yourself. Like, isn't that more evidence that it's gone through? Not less.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But a lot of people dismiss it because they've already heard little bits of it generally. But trust me, anybody who ever says that to me in full, nobody on earth in this generation has heard what we teach until they've heard it from us. And that's going to be the case, because there's so many things that we will eventually share that has never been taught on earth. So, and that's going to also be the case. But even if you have heard bits and pieces, well, that's because God wants you to hear bits and pieces. You know, God's not doesn't want to just share truth with me. God's like we learned in that discussion. God's has the feeling of equality with everyone. God wants to share truth with you just as much as God wants to share it with me. So he's not going to favour me over you. Right? So, but there are some fundamental things that every person will need to learn in order to progress and to actually become a being who's able to receive things that are beyond the perfect natural man. And that's something that needs to occur. And Mary and I need to go to the toilet.
Yeah, let's have a break. And everyone
just a short break, and then we can